Welcome to VNT. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. After years of bluster, political posturing, and tough talk from the highest offices in Washington, and a relentless campaign of economic brinkmanship, the once imposing American tariff wall has finally crumbled under its own weight. On November 14, 2025, Washington effectively admitted defeat in its bruising, years-long trade war with China, a conflict that reshaped global markets and strained international alliances. U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods, which once soared to a staggering 145%, will now drop dramatically to 30%, signaling a major policy reversal. China, in response, is lowering its own retaliatory tariffs from 125% to just 10%, opening the door for renewed trade and a cautious optimism among global businesses. But make no mistake, this is not a carefully planned strategic reset. It's a retreat, a reluctant step back after years of escalation. The Trump administration's tariffs, designed to bring Beijing to its knees and restore American manufacturing, instead dragged the U.S. economy to the brink of stagflation, shuttering factories and fueling inflation. The truce, which includes a 90-day suspension of certain tariffs, is less a masterstroke and more a desperate move to stop the economic bleeding and prevent further damage to American livelihoods. China agreed to lift some non-tariff restrictions, but the heart of the deal is a massive rollback of Trump's signature policy, a tacit admission that the strategy backfired. The only thing left standing is a 20% tariff, supposedly to pressure China on fentanyl, a thin fig leaf meant to cover what many see as a failed strategy and a costly miscalculation. In the end, Washington blinked first, forced to accept a deal it could have had years ago, without the chaos, the economic pain, or the loss of global credibility. The so-called master of the deal has been forced to settle for far less, and as the world watches, America's rivals and allies alike are left to wonder what comes next. Trump's trade war was built on a simple idea: tariffs would punish China and revive American manufacturing. The promise was bold: bring jobs back home, make American factories hum again, and show the world that the U.S. could stand up to China's economic might. It sounded simple enough, but the reality was far more complicated. But the U.S. and Chinese economies are deeply intertwined. Tariffs hit American companies as hard as Chinese ones. Supply chains stretch across oceans, linking businesses, workers, and consumers in both countries. Disrupting that web had consequences no one could ignore. For every Chinese factory, there's an American business relying on it. From electronics to clothing, U.S. companies depend on Chinese manufacturing to keep their shelves stocked and their prices competitive. The tariffs became a tax on Apple, Walmart, and thousands of U.S. firms. Suddenly, costs soared, paperwork piled up, and uncertainty became the new normal for American businesses large and small. The plan to rally allies failed. America first left the U.S. fighting alone. Instead of building a united front, the U.S. found itself isolated on the world stage, with other countries reluctant to join the fight. Allies watched from the sidelines, unwilling to risk their own economies. They saw the fallout and chose to protect their own interests, leaving the U.S. to bear the brunt of the conflict. The result? Soaring costs for U.S. businesses, higher prices for consumers, and inflation. Everyday Americans felt the pinch at the checkout line, while small businesses struggled to stay afloat. China's retaliation targeted American farmers and key Trump constituencies. Soybeans, pork, and other exports faced new barriers, hitting rural communities especially hard. Instead of a quick win, the U.S. got a costly war of attrition, hurting its own citizens most. Factories closed, families worried about their futures, and the promised manufacturing boom never arrived. The policy didn't just backfire, it blew up in America's face. Wall Street wobbled, confidence faltered, and the economic pain spread far beyond the intended targets. The lesson? Economic self-harm is not a winning strategy. In a globalized world, going it alone can mean shooting yourself in the foot, and paying the price for years to come. The tariff strategy failed, not just in theory, but in practice. America simply can't function without a steady flow of Chinese imports, no matter how tough the rhetoric gets. Nearly every product in American homes, from the phones in our pockets to the medicine in our cabinets, relies on Chinese manufacturing and supply chains. Cutting off this supply was never realistic. It's like trying to live without a skeleton. The shelves would empty, prices would soar, and daily life would grind to a halt. The U.S. is especially dependent on China for rare earth minerals, critical ingredients for everything from electric vehicles and smartphones to advanced fighter jets and renewable energy tech. When China threatened to restrict these exports, panic spread through the Pentagon and Silicon Valley, exposing just how vulnerable America's most advanced industries really are. Building alternative supply chains isn't just expensive, it would take a decade or more, requiring massive investment, new infrastructure, and global cooperation. Pharmaceuticals are another vulnerability. Many essential drug ingredients, from antibiotics to painkillers, come from Chinese factories, leaving the US exposed in times of crisis. The trade war exposed how easily China could hold America's health and industry hostage, threatening everything from hospital supplies to car manufacturing. China's leverage was patience. It knew the US couldn't untangle decades of deeply intertwined supply chains overnight, no matter how urgent the political pressure. For every company trying to leave China, there were huge logistical and financial hurdles. Relocating factories, retraining workers, and finding new suppliers isn't simple or cheap. In the end, it wasn't political speeches or trade threats that decided the outcome. It was economics, cold, hard numbers that kept America tied to Beijing. Trump's obsession with the trade deficit missed the point. The deficit isn't a scoreboard. It reflects America's own spending and saving habits. For decades, the US has spent more than it produces and saved less than it invests. Foreign capital fills the gap, and the trade deficit is the result, not the cause, of this dynamic. Tariffs don't fix the deficit, they just make imports more expensive, fueling inflation or causing shortages. The real solution? Increase domestic savings, reduce government debt, and boost competitiveness. These are slow, difficult fixes, far less dramatic than a trade war. It's easier to blame a foreign country than tackle tough economic reforms. But the collapse of the tariff policy proves that macroeconomic laws can't be bullied. In the end, reality always wins. While politicians played economic chicken, ordinary Americans paid the price. The claim that China would pay the tariffs was a fantasy. US importers paid and passed costs to consumers. Everyday items got more expensive, hitting lower and middle-income families hardest. Businesses relying on Chinese parts faced impossible choices: raise prices or lose profits. Many delayed hiring, halted expansion, or just tried to survive. American farmers were hit hardest by China's retaliation, losing their biggest export markets overnight. Harvests rotted, and taxpayers funded multi-billion-dollar bailouts. The policy meant to help Main Street instead hurt it at every turn. The trade war was a perfect example of economic self-sabotage. In the end, Americans paid for their own government's mistakes. The US faced political turmoil as the trade war's pain became undeniable. Every price hike and layoff fueled criticism and falling approval ratings. Democracies struggled to endure self-inflicted economic pain. China, with its authoritarian system, faced less domestic pressure and played the long game. Beijing's strategy: wait out the US, target key political groups, and project calm resolve. China's patience paid off, forcing the US to back down and sending a message to the world. America's threats lost credibility, while China consolidated its global position. In the end, China won by waiting, not fighting. The tariffs are down, but the conflict isn't over, just paused. This is a 90-day ceasefire, not a peace treaty. The core tensions and rivalries remain unresolved. If talks fail, tariffs could return even higher, reigniting the economic pain. Both sides are now seeking to reduce their dependence on each other, destabilizing global trade. The trade war has pushed countries to look for alternatives to the US-led financial system. Capital is fleeing the dollar, and China is building its own global networks. Ironically, the trade war sped up the very future America feared. The lesson: tariffs failed, hurting US consumers, businesses, and alliances. America needs a smarter, more strategic approach, one that leads, not isolates. The truce is a brief window to find that path. In a complex world, there are no easy answers. Let's hope Washington learns before the next round begins.